just seen a video I did recently on why I'm switching to Android. Well, yes, that might be the right decision for me personally. There are two sides to every argument, and the iPhone SE 2020 is one hell of a side. In case you've been living under a rock, the iPhone SE takes the same tried and true formula from the original SE, which of course came out over 4 years ago, and simply takes all of the most recent internals and puts it into a much more affordable package. Because at $399, there's no doubt that this is probably the best value iPhone that has ever been made. Also, that's very red. At $399, you're not sacrificing a lot, beyond, I guess, the fact that it still comes with the tiny 5-watt charger in the box. So you still get water resistance, something that is pretty rare on phones of this price. You get wireless charging, and probably most importantly, you get the same Apple A13 chip as in the full iPhone 11 and the 11 Pro range, which means that this $399 phone is probably the most powerful phone that you can get regardless of price. One small recommendation though, while you can pick up the base model with 64 gigs of storage, for only $50 more, you can upgrade that to 128 gigs, and I would definitely recommend that. It's certainly usable to spend time with a 64 gig phone, but considering that it's not that much more, you're gonna get a lot more longevity, especially considering that this phone should be getting updates for years to come. Apple delivered this with a very simple strategy, the parts bin. So the design here is very similar to 2018's iPhone 8, which was an upgraded version of the iPhone 7, which you could buy after the iPhone 6 came out. Of course, that being the S model of the iPhone 6. So this design, I guess, is 5 years old at this point, which, to be fair, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if you're broke, buy an iPhone SE. I'll admit, I'm not a massive fan of this design. Well, yes, it is better than that original iPhone 6. I like the glass back, and they've done a couple of minor tweaks, but generally speaking, it lacks the specialness of that original SE, which had that awesome chamfer design and that really tiny size. I was about to say it's not an outdated design, but when you look at the front, you look at the giant size of the bezels here, it does look a little bit dated. Well, yes, it is time for me to set up Apple Pay and Siri in the settings. A lot of components have been lifted straight off of the iPhone 8, including Touch ID, which makes sense considering that it is much more mask-friendly than Face ID. And of course, the screen itself, while it is only a 4.7-inch display, and yeah, it's low resolution, blah, blah, blah. The thing is, this is still a very bright, color-accurate IPS panel, and it is held up remarkably well considering that it's, well, a few years old at this point. But you know what doesn't feel like a 5-year-old design? The sponsor of today's video, Rise of Kingdoms. Rise of Kingdoms is a free-to-play real-time strategy game where you can choose one of 11 civilizations, build your army, and have them be led by historical commanders. One of the things I appreciate about Rise of Kingdoms is just how much there is to do. Not only can you focus on building your city, you can go fight barbarians, and it all takes place on a seamless RTS map. The battles happen in real time, and there's so much detail in the game between the individual cities, as well as everything you want to do to customize your army, and even stuff like day-night cycles and weather. There's always something to experience. There's also a special event going on right now called the Osiris League, where you can earn even more in-game rewards. Governors can join alliances of up to 170 players and band together to form vast empires. Now, I've only been playing the game for a few days, but what I found is that there's a ton of depth there. There's a lot that you can experience, there's a lot that you can do without having to leave the confines of your own home. Now, if this sounds fun and you want to give it a try and help support the channel, definitely be sure to check out Rise of Kingdoms at the link in the description. And of course, huge shout out to them for sponsoring our iPhone SE video. The most impressive part of the SE is absolutely the Apple A13 inside. Let me be super clear. This is the most powerful phone you can buy, period. I don't care what price point you're playing in. So it is pretty much identical to what you get on the iPhone 11 and the 11 Pro, even though it is down to 3 gigs of RAM compared to 4, but trust me, you won't notice. And when you put this thing side by side with a Pixel 3a, it is not even close. You also have Wi-Fi 6 as well as Bluetooth 5 from the bigger iPhones. It has support for NFC as well as Apple Pay. The SE camera is a hybrid of the iPhone 8 lens and sensor and the iPhone 11 processor. What this means is it actually is a fairly decent step up, and it does get really close to the iPhone 11. When you look at a lot of these stills side by side, the dynamic range especially is very impressive. The only place that you really do notice a deficiency here is in the sharpness of the image. If you're looking at it on Instagram, you're totally fine. But as soon as you start to pixel peep, you'll notice that it is a little bit on the softer side. Somewhere else that the SE falls a bit short is in the night sight mode, or rather the lack of, because while yes, the low light photos are fine on the iPhone, they're much better on something like the Pixel 3a. When you put it together as a whole though, it is a solid package, and it does have portrait mode for both the rear camera as well as the front. Now, as with all of these things, it always misses the side of my glasses, but beyond that, it does do a respectable job. Where I think the iPhone SE really shines is in video. So this is 4K video, completely untouched, straight off of the iPhone SE. And while yes, it might not be quite as stable as something like what you get on the iPhone 11, it's really impressive to see this level of video quality on a phone at this price, right? I mean, generally speaking, iPhones have been ahead of the game on video for a while, and this really cements that even at a $399 budget. While on paper, the 1800 mAh battery isn't particularly impressive, because of the efficient display, processor, and iOS, battery life actually isn't too bad on the SE. Still not quite where I would like it. It does feel a little bit of a generation behind, but it is certainly enough to make it through a day. So as someone who's been struggling with the decision between iOS and Android, there have been a lot of major advantages that I've seen on both sides, which make it a very complicated decision, because at its very root, both Android and iOS are very good these days. So for example, with Android, one of the main advantages is of course the customization, not only in the operating system, which of course gives you a much deeper level of control, but also in the amount of hardware that you can pick up. Now yes, the iPhone line is probably the broadest that it's ever been. Between the SE on the low end, you have the iPhone 11, the Pro Max, but even that pales in comparison to the hundreds of legitimately very impressive Android options out there. If you want folding phones, as I mentioned in my previous video, if you care about 5G and high refresh rate, all of that stuff is available on the Android side of the fence. When it comes to app support, at least for me, 95% of the apps that I use on a daily basis are available not only on Android and iOS, but are of very similar quality. There aren't major differences, and of course, what are phones these days beyond like a camera and just a portal to whatever app you want to use? Now there are certainly some exceptions. Instagram would be a good one, which I do think is significantly better on iOS, and of course there are some advantages on the Android side of the camp. For example, if you want to play some retro games via an emulator, good luck trying to do that on an iPhone unless you want to do some weird side loading. When you talk about the Apple ecosystem, there's a negative connotation there, and I will certainly admit I have perpetuated that with, even my last video. Now, yes, it is very annoying once you get into the Apple ecosystem and everyone has you on iMessage and your grandma calls you on FaceTime and you're charging with your Apple Card and you have your Apple Watch and your AirPods and your Mac and your iPad. There's so many things that make it very difficult once you have that iPhone to get out. But by that same token, there are some advantages, of course, to if you have a couple of Apple devices in your life, right? Like having an iMessage pop up on your Mac is great, or being able to take a call on your iPad and vice versa. All this stuff is nice to see, but you don't have to go all in. One thing I will say though, if you are coming from Android, all of the Google apps work great on iOS with almost no exceptions. But if you're going from an iPhone to Android, well, you can listen to Apple Music, and probably another app. I can't think of one though. Something I will give Apple props for is the level of focus they put on not only security, but also privacy in iOS. Not only does Apple have an excellent track record of continuously supporting devices, something I'll talk about a little bit later, but on top of that, they also put a lot of emphasis on privacy. Now we've done an entire video on this, so you can definitely find out more about my personal thoughts. But TLDW, I definitely think Apple does a better job than pretty much anyone else in the industry for protecting your personal privacy. Yes, if you look at a poll of random people, they might think that Google or Facebook are more trustworthy, which I find to be quite wrong. But generally speaking, when you look at just how much they've invested in things such as differential privacy, and when you look at the general business model of Apple makes money when they sell you a phone and Google makes money when they sell you an ad using the data they acquire using their phones, it kind of becomes fairly straightforward in my opinion that while we all spend a lot of time online, but especially these days with all of us sort of so invested in our digital lives, I think it really matters personally that I have a device that actually is looking out for my privacy. Yes, that might be a little bit overblown. Yes, I might be that weirdo on the internet telling you about why privacy matters, but I do think this is a legitimate selling point for using iOS and Apple products in general. If I had to give you a single pitch on why iOS might make more sense for you compared to Android, it would be in the long-term software support. Now, Android has certainly gotten better, but generally speaking, an Android phone may only get you around 2 years or so of updates, and that might not even be major updates. Those might be security updates after you get like one major release. On the iOS side, you're pretty much, if you look at the last few years of phones, looking at somewhere between 5 and 6 years of software support. I mean, look at the iPhone 6s. This is a flagship phone that came out in 2015 and is still getting updates here in 2020 and very likely may continue to get updates through the next year, year and a half or so. There's simply no other Android phone that can come close regardless of the price. I mean, even if you look at something like the Google Pixel line, the original Pixel 1 is already stopped getting updates as of December of 2019. And that's the best case scenario where it actually got more updates than Google originally promised. Okay, so say you're considering the safe, practical choice of buying an iPhone this time around. Well, at that $400 price point, the iPhone SE 2020 seems like the obvious choice, right? Well, maybe, but there are a couple of other things you may consider. So for example, at around that same $400 price point, you can buy a used or refurbished iPhone XR. Now the XR is a great phone. It was my daily for pretty much all of last year, and for good reason. Not only does it have the modern swipey Face ID design, swipey, I'm gonna say this swipey, you know, swipey designs? Yeah, it has the swipey design, but you also have a great camera, very solid battery life. But the downside is that if you do pick up a used phone, as always, you have to consider that that battery is probably going to be not at 100% health. Whereas when you look at the SE, it actually has a slightly newer processor, which means it'll get updates for longer, and you have that sort of security knowing that it has not been abused by little Timmy with his 20-hour Fortnite gaming sessions. You could also just buy a brand new iPhone 11, which at $700 is almost double the price of the SE, but for your extra $300, you're getting a better camera as well as an ultra wide. You're getting a bigger display with your swipey interface as well as your Face ID. And you are also getting what should be at least somewhat better battery life. The iPhone 11 does a pretty good job, whereas the SE, of course, is fine. But when you look at the almost doubled price tag, a lot of those benefits, I would argue, probably aren't worth it for most people. And if you look at something like the iPhone 11 Pro, stop. There is no reason to spend $1,000 plus on an iPhone 11 Pro right now, when not only could you get a lot of other phones that are, I would argue, just as good if not better, but also there's certainly going to be a major update later this year which will bring like higher refresh rate and 5G and all that kind of stuff. Don't spend $1,000 on an iPhone right now. Just don't do that. So is it time to switch to iOS? Well, if you are looking for something in the mid-range, that iPhone SE 2020 is a no-brainer. It really is a game changer, and if you don't really care about Android versus iOS, it is an incredibly compelling value. If, however, you are looking for something a little bit more exciting, a little bit more expensive, you want a brand new flagship, then there are many reasons why I personally think Android is the move right now. So I am very curious, is the iPhone SE enough to tempt you away from Android? Definitely be sure to let me know, and of course, huge shout out to Rise of Kingdoms for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to go download them at the link in the description. Until next time, I'm going to go remember how to use a home button. Is that an awkward way to end the frame? That's a little bit weird, isn't it?